All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Air Pollution Control District's Clearing the Air Workshop Series. I'm Michelle King, APCD's Director of Program Planning, and I'll be hosting tonight's workshop on Louisville's Year in Air Quality. I'm joined by tonight's presenters, APCD's Director Rachel Hamilton, our Air Monitoring Manager Billy DeWitt, our Communications Specialist Matt Mudd, and our Regulatory Coordinator Byron Gary. I'm really excited to have this panel full of air quality expertise to share with you tonight. Our workshop is being recorded, so we're starting off in a format that limits some attendee functions so that we don't have accidental audio or video disruptions. But we will be opening the floor following the presentation to allow for more direct interactions. The workshop video and the presentation slides themselves will be posted to our website afterward for some additional viewing. So we developed the Clearing the Air workshop concept in order to provide opportunities for us to share the district's work with our community, improving our collective understanding of Louisville's air quality and how it's regulated, and empowering people with information and insights into this important aspect of our city's environment and health. Our aim is to provide a more informal setting for sharing information and to have open discussion, as compared to some of the more formal settings that occur during our board's monthly meetings or in a public hearing that's bound by regulatory requirements. As such, after the presentation, we hope that you'll stick around to join us for a Q&A and discussion period. This evening, we're going to take a look back at Louisville's air quality this year. We're going to look at our current status compares to national standards. And then we're going to hear about last year's progress in enhancing our air monitoring network, check in on arguably the most noticeable air quality story of the year, odors, and take a quick glimpse at a few highlights in the coming year. But first, a few quick webinar tips. Again, you will start the webinar muted, but we'll be able to interact directly during the discussion portion. You can drop questions in the chat at any time, and we'll start there when we get to that Q&A portion, but you can also wait to ask in person too. And if you think of a question after you leave, please feel free to email it to us later at clearingtheair@louisvilleky.gov. Lastly, remember, there are no silly questions here. Please share the air with other attendees if there are lots of folks that want to join in the discussion. And lastly, please take a minute after we finish to complete the survey and provide us some feedback for future workshops. We're trying to crowdsource some ideas here. Now, let's get into tonight's topic, Louisville's Year in Air Quality. This is our roadmap for the evening, and you're going to see this again as we move through our topics and transition between speakers. So for now, let's start with a look at Louisville's NAAQS status, something Byron Gary will tell us much more about. Byron?
Thanks, Michelle. My name is Byron Gary. Like Michelle said, I'm the regulatory coordinator for the district, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS. Next slide. So just as background on what the NAAQS are, they are set for US EPA for 6 pollutants. These pollutants are sort of the most common outdoor air pollutants that are found all around the world, really, and within the US, and are harmful to public health and the environment. And they come from a variety of different sources. And EPA reviews and sets these standards periodically by statute every 5 years. Usually we see it stretch a little bit longer than that, but reviewing the latest science to determine what are healthy levels to set those at. And for some of these, there's no safe level, but what is determined by public health standards. Next slide. And the way they set these are at monitored levels. So these are the standards for all 6 of those NAAQS, or criteria pollutants, also called sometimes. The standards are set at what we should be monitoring at different averaging times throughout the city. And as you can see, starting this year off, we were in non-attainment for one standard, the ozone standard, which is set at 70 parts per billion, or 0.070 parts per million. Sometimes hear us refer to those two ways. But next slide. This is one we've seen a lot of progress in over the years. And at the end of 2021, averaging out the 3 years, 2019 through 2021, we saw our level drop below the standard to 69 parts per billion. And for this reason, next slide, we were able to submit a redesignation request. EPA is still processing that, and it hasn't been approved yet, but we do continue to maintain that standard as of right now. So we expect EPA to approve that relatively soon. Next slide, though. We are looking forward to a new standard to be set for fine particulate matter sometime soon. EPA has gone through their internal review already, which involves a lot of really lengthy, in-depth documents that are reviewed by the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee, or CASAC, including the Integrated Science Review, the Risk and Exposure Assessment, and the Policy Assessments. Each of these documents ranges from a couple hundred to over 1,000 pages and looks at the latest science and how that should be applied in setting the newest NAAQS. EPA has completed, they have told us, completed their internal drafting of a new standard and have sent that on for executive review up to the White House through the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs / the Offices of Management and Budget for regulations such as this one that are expected to have a huge impact. Those really have to go through the highest levels of review at the White House. And we're expecting a proposal sometime soon. That's been sitting with the OMB for about 4 months now. So we're expecting that to come out in proposal form sometime shortly. And then the final step in setting that new NAAQS is a final rule that we expect to be somewhere between 8 and 10 micrograms per cubic meter. Just reading what EPA said internally in that ISA, REA, and policy assessment. And next slide, this shows where we are right now and why that might present a next challenge for us here in Louisville. We have seen a lot of progress in fine particulate matter and do expect that to continue to show a downward trend. But if that standard were to be set today, we would be potentially in exceedance of it if it were set at that 8 to 10 microgram per cubic meter range that we expect. So that's looking forward sort of to next year, potentially with NAAQS standards. And I think that's the last that I have. So I'll pass it on off to Matt.
Awesome. Thank you, Byron, and thank you, Michelle, two tough people to follow up. I'm the communications coordinator at the district. Michelle, if you can go on to the next slide. I'm going to give you a recap of our year using the Air Quality Index, which is a tool we use to both measure and communicate air quality. So the Air Quality Index, or since we like acronyms, AQI, is a standardized metric created by the EPA in order to convey the impact that air pollution could have on human health. The AQI is calculated for 5 pollutants based on the amount that is being monitored in the air by our monitoring network or any monitoring network throughout the country. If you paid attention to Byron's slides, you'll see that these are all criteria pollutants that are regulated by the National Ambient Air Quality Standards through the Clean Air Act: ground level ozone, particle pollution, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide. Like Byron said, these are selected because they're common, harmful to public health, and come from a variety of sources. The highest AQI between these pollutants at any time sets the AQI for the area. You'll see that ground level ozone and particle pollution are bolded there. That's because they're generally the only 2 pollutants that we see at high enough levels to set our area's AQI. So I'll dive a little bit deeper into that later. But going on, the AQI value will range from 1 to 500. An AQI value of 100 generally aligns directly with the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for that pollutant. And the values are further sorted into 6 health-based categories to kind of make it clear. So next slide, please. Here's the Air Quality Index in whole. As you can see, it's the values from 1 to 500 or 1 to infinity, if you will. I think that it could go beyond that if there really were concentrations that high. But 1 to 500 sorted into 6 color-coded categories, all of which contain basic health guidance. The good and the moderate categories generally align with meeting that National Ambient Air Quality Standard, so those are considered acceptable for public health. Any category above that is considered unhealthy, at first for groups that are more sensitive to air pollution, and then for all of the general public. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's a little visualization to recap how our year in 2022 looked in air quality, at least through December 12th when I made this graph. If you take the time to count those boxes individually, you'll see that we've had 218 good days, 120 moderate days, and 7 days that were unhealthy for sensitive groups. Every year has its own variances, but this year has been somewhat instructive when it comes to understanding the basic air quality trends that we'll see most years. Let's go on and we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. So here, I mentioned those 2 pollutants earlier that were the most common here that generally set our AQI, and these are the AQI values for those individual pollutants. You have ozone on the top, which is generally higher during the summer. It's created due to a chemical reaction in the air, and hot, sunny, calm, dry conditions help that reaction happen. Those unhealthy for the sensitive group days you see in June were due to a string of warm, dry, still weather. We had a similar day like that in September, which you can see. That's not as common, but you'll see variances like that depending on the weather patterns for the year. Then at the bottom, you'll see fine particle pollution, a little bit more steady throughout the year. But in winter, you'll see more often some moderate days due to often smoke impacts, a variety of other things from wood burning stoves, bonfires. That exceedance that you see in November was actually due to a nearby wildfire. Those impacts were mostly felt during the overnight hours on the 9th of November, just for a little bit of reference. So you combine these two into our AQI for the year and you get our next visualization. As you can see, those are the 2 that set it. You combine them and you get our whole year. Another way of looking at it for those who like visuals. So next we'll be looking at kind of how this year compares to years in the past. I included 3 recent years, our last 3 years, those of which that are among the, so for some reference, those 3 years do show, based on the same exact monitoring data, that we're meeting the national ambient air quality standards. So that's just a little reference for you. And then as you can see, as we go back, the historical years, which start in 2010 and go back in 15-year increments, these are just sample years, so they don't tell us the whole entire trend, but they kind of show us the most important sign of progress, which is that those very unhealthy days, and unhealthy for sensitive group days have all seen a significant decrease. One important thing to note is that the AQI changes over time as the national ambient air quality standards change. So we're comparing those past years to the standards now. Back then, they might not have considered that day to be unhealthy or unhealthy for sensitive groups. But now, based on our current, more stringent, more protective standards, that's how we would view that day. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is all years. It's a little overwhelming if you maybe, so I just wanted to mention it and show you can see that basic trend as time goes on. This is the last 25 years. You'll see less red days, less orange days, a little bit more often. The levels are going down in the summer, especially when you see less ozone impacts. And that should be it for me on this year in recap. Just want to make sure that you all know that these things are all kind of available to you. First off, I want to make mention of the fact that a couple of those visualizations were made using EPA's air data, which is a really awesome resource. I'll drop a link to it after my presentation, and I believe it's linked at the end of our presentation. But you can basically get all of this AQI data from past years, currently compare it, make a visualization. You don't even need to do too much work to make it happen. And it's especially when I first started looking into this stuff, when I first started working here, it was a very valuable tool to kind of understand where we're at, where we've been, the progress that we've made, etc. The information that we make available every single day, air quality forecasts are sent out on our social media feeds at APCD. That's using the categories of the air quality index, so good, moderate, or if there's a forecast of unhealthy for sensitive groups or above, we'll issue an air quality alert. That contains some basic health guidance, lets people know that they should, especially if they're in those sensitive groups, perhaps take it easy, take some actions to avoid their exposure. And we encourage all folks to do a little bit less to pollute the air on those days. So we have a spot on our website, which is also linked right there when you get the presentation on our website afterwards, to sign up for air quality alerts. You can get them directly to your phone. You can get them through your email, any option. And lastly, we have live air quality index. So our Louisville Air Watch service, you can get on there. It'll tell you at all times what the AQI is, some basic health guidance, and a little map of the monitoring sites throughout the city. So I think that's just really cool. And I really appreciate that our monitoring team is on it and makes a resource like that. So that's it from me, and I will pass it along to Billy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Billy DeWitt, Air Monitoring Program Manager with APCD, and I wanted to give a brief update on our monitoring progress with VOC/air toxics. First, a brief background. In the 1940s, World War II rubber manufacturing industrial complex was set in western Louisville along the Ohio River, and thus created a somewhat large conglomerate of sources of volatile organic compounds, which are emitted from the production of rubber and ancillary products. In 2001, due to community concerns about air toxics in general and volatile organic compounds, the West Louisville Air Toxics study was performed, which included a good deal of ambient air monitoring to measure levels of VOCs, metals, and other air toxic pollutants. This study indicated that there were a group of compounds that were of concern due to elevated cancer risk exposure to the public, and those were produced as part of that study. And as such, in 2005, the Air Pollution Control District put together the Strategic Toxic Air Reduction Program, or STAR, in an effort to put better controls on air toxics and lower these levels of concern for cancer risk and non-cancer risk to the public. The Strategic Toxic Air Reduction Program, very successful program, and uses air dispersion modeling to estimate concentrations of pollution based on emission factors and emission inventories and potential to emit. And so this is a very effective program, but in conjunction with this, the University of Louisville and the West Jefferson County Community Task Force wanted to do some actual ambient monitoring to follow up, and that was conducted from 2005 to 2013. And that monitoring did show really the results of the STAR program and some significant decreases in volatile organic compounds from the Rubbertown area. This monitoring it did end in 2013, however, due to some budgetary constraints with the University of Louisville. And at that time, the Air Pollution Control District decided to begin to plan and set up their own air toxics monitoring. So in around 2016, we were looking for ways to implement this monitoring in a new and different way than was done with the University of Louisville. The University of Louisville uses a form of traditional gas chromatography, in which a canister was sampled air for once out of every 12 days to get a 24-hour average. In around the 2016 timeframe, EPA was testing an automated version of the gas chromatography method, which would combine the air intake system along with the analysis of the compounds themselves in a more compact unit. And they were doing this to prepare for volatile organic compound measurements as part of an ozone precursor program in an effort to understand formation of ozone. So we took a look at those studies and decided to invest in that technology in the Rubbertown area to begin monitor for air toxics, at least the volatile organic compound component of air toxics. In 2021, we began reporting VOC air toxics monitoring data to the board, the Air Pollution Control Board, after a few years of testing with the equipment. Next slide, please. Of course, it took a few years because we did have some significant challenges. This was a new application of that existing technology, and it required a steep learning curve, and we had to develop a level of expertise in-house on how to utilize the instrumentation most efficiently. There were early operational problems which had to be addressed by the vendor, including sending the entire system back to the vendor. And one of the most challenging pieces of that project has been to develop sufficient QA/QC standards. They had to be developed and tested, and we had to select appropriate vendors that could produce the standards and then test them with the system to make sure they were compatible. And lastly, but maybe most importantly, the vast amount of data that's brought in by these systems requires many layers of processing the data and quality assurance levels. There's daily, weekly, monthly quality assurance performed on the data. Post-processing is done to ensure that the compounds are properly identified and quantified. Next slide, please. But the successes with the Auto GC, after a lot of work by the air monitoring team, we now receive near real-time VOC data from our Algonquin Parkway site. And I failed to mention earlier, that's the placement of our original Auto GC along Algonquin Parkway, because that is a maximum, a cumulative maximum site for the original University of Louisville Air Toxics study, and it's directly downwind of the main Rubbertown facilities. But that near real-time VOC data is brought into the office hourly via telemetry, and we even receive text message when there are elevated levels of any of those compounds. We've now collected and fully validated a full year of VOC data from Algonquin Parkway, and a report from APCD on that 1 year of data is coming fairly soon. We're working on that now. We've also installed and now operating a second Auto GC at the Cannons Lane site, and this one was actually required due to the ozone rule, where we have to monitor precursors of ozone at our Cannons Lane site. But additionally, we've included those chemicals of concern that we're already measuring at Algonquin Parkway that were identified by the original West Louisville Air Toxics study, so we can get a comparison from one side of the county to the other. And now both systems are fully operating beginning the summer of this year. And here is a quick link and visual of a piece of the report that we give to the Air Pollution Control Board. This shows all these reports can be found on our website. There's the link right there. And you'll see just a portion of the report. The actual report explains a lot of these categories and colors in detail. The automated gas chromatography is very complicated, and each chemical has its own level of data confidence, and we grade those, we color code those according to how confident we are in those concentrations. But if you take a look through the report online, I think there's an ample amount of discussion of what those colors and categories represent. And of course, if it doesn't make sense after that, we always welcome questions on those. I think that's all I'll have. I'll pass it to the next presenter.
Thank you very much, Billy. And before I get started, I'm Rachel Hamilton. I'm the director of the Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District, and I'm really thankful that you all have joined us tonight. I also want to express my thanks to my colleagues on this webinar, including Michelle King, Billy DeWitt, Byron Gary, and Matt Mudd. So got a little bit of our technical background, and we're going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about something that unfortunately lots of folks in Louisville have suffered with this year, and that's odors. Next slide, please. So generally speaking, APCD has lots of data. Billy didn't mention the 46 million separate data points on air quality that we receive each year and QA, QC, and validate, but that's a big number. And we expect that, especially when we're running continuous equipment like the auto GCs and our own PM monitors. What we don't expect to see is the unfortunate uptick in odor complaints that we had this summer. You'll see 2 years worth of data showing complaints, and these cover complaints that we may receive about open burning or odors or even dust. You'll see that odors by far are the lion's share. Beginning in late August, early September, Louisville began experiencing a drought. And unfortunately, due to the construction of our sewer system, which is combined, meaning the sanitary wastewater, the stuff that comes out of your home, for example, combines with the stormwater that gets taken away to avoid flooding. This year, MSD has indicated that the flow to the sewer system, beginning in that late August drought, has been reduced from about 80 million gallons a day going into the Morris-Forman water quality system to about 30. And with our combined sewer system, for a variety of reasons I'll talk about in a moment, we've received over 800 complaints since then. Next slide, please. And here's what it looks like. From an equity standpoint, we see a concentration of odor reports in our West Louisville neighborhoods. And that's partly because Morris-Forman, which is the state's largest wastewater treatment plant, is located there, but also because the sewer lines that carry our combined wastewater lead there. Next slide, please. And here's the problem. With our wastewater treatment collection system, it allows sewer odors from the sewer collection system to enter ambient air because sometimes that sewer system has vents. For example, manholes have vents in them. If you ever walk across the street and you come across a vented manhole, you might get a whiff of sewer odors, and that's a safety measure. That's to keep that manhole from flying up into the air if we have a big rain. We also have catch basins, which are a lot like that trap underneath your sink that holds water to keep sewer odors out of your house. The catch basin, which has a grate on it at the curb, is intended to do the same thing. But what we've found is that MSD's system contains a large number of untrapped catch basins. And so during a similar drought in 2019, the district sent a notice of violation to MSD, and they're currently subject to an ongoing agreed board order with the Air Pollution Control Board to try to reduce these odors, both from Morris-Forman and from the collection system. With respect to that, that agreed board order requires MSD to develop and implement a countywide odor control master plan. That is a phased multi-year project, which includes periodic updates and reports. And you'll see a little screenshot there from MSD's odor control page. You can go to that web page and you can see the technical memoranda that MSD has developed to date. There are 2 outstanding memoranda. One is looking at recommendations for control technology for the collection system and for Morris-Forman. The other is actually an implementation plan. And finally, there's a full summary of the work that MSD has done to date. They're also required to rebuild and replace untrapped catch basins in the Park Duval neighborhood. And since they've identified others throughout their system, they are beginning work to address those as well, particularly in the California, Shawnee, and other neighborhoods in West Louisville. They're required to clean all of their catch basins and to put a schedule of that cleaning on their website. They also need to have a complete response form on their website. It's much like what APCD presents to its board on a monthly basis. that lists the complaints that we receive and the results of our investigations. And then finally, they were required to hold community meetings and develop a communication plan to begin to talk to the community about their odor control efforts. We met with MSD today. So they're getting ready to finalize their report. We wanted to be sure that we were all clear about that implementation plan. And one of the things that they've committed to do is continuing quarterly public meetings to hear from the public about odor issues. Next slide, please. We know that odors can be vexing. They're really a quality of life issue for many in our community. And so we've put together an odor service request dashboard. This will give you an idea when you come into this dashboard, how many complaints we receive. And this is a very searchable and very usable tool that will let you look at specific zip codes, specific time periods. And importantly, it will also let you see the actual complaint that we receive. If you have questions about using this tool, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Next slide, please. This goes for continuing to report objectionable odors. As I said, we know people are vexed by odors and that this is a quality of life issue. But continuing to report to us where you're observing odors helps APCD because it allows us to be able to send a compliance officer out to investigate your odor, to make arrangements for them to be out there after hours, either in the evening or in the morning, if the reports indicate that there is an ongoing issue during those times. But equally as important, it allows us to share that information with MSD so that they can direct their efforts on a short-term basis to trying to mitigate some of the odors that we've experienced this summer. There are many ways that you can report odors to us. You can call 574-6000. There is an online form that you can use. You can send us an email. Metro 311 is a great way to get in touch with us during the day. They also have an online portal. The Smell My City app, where you can contact MSD directly at 540-6000 or through their online form. Next slide. When you report odors to us, your observations are extremely important. Your nose is the most sensitive odor detection device out there. And so when you report that odor, if you can tell us the location you smelled it, the time, duration, the nature, the intensity, the source, if that's apparent, if it's making you ill or causing you to be uncomfortable, please report that. And then if you'll leave us your contact information, our compliance officers will follow up with you after their investigation. That said, you are welcome to make an anonymous complaint. We'll treat it just the same. And you can check up on our investigation by going to that community compliance report on our board's webpage. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter.
Find my unmute button. Thank you so much, Rachel. Well, now that we've taken a good look back, let's talk a little bit about the year ahead of us. APCD protects air quality through the application of regulations, those that EPA develops as well as those that are locally developed. These regulations are enacted locally through our Air Pollution Control Board. So when this happens, regulation development materials are prepared by the district, and after review of a committee of the board, those are put out for public comment. The first regulatory package that will come before the board in 2023 is already underway. Regulations 1.02, definitions, 1.11, control of open burning, 1.13, control of objectionable odors in the ambient air, and 1.15, version of federal regulations incorporated by reference, are all included in this current package. You can find the proposed regulations, a red line strikeout version of each of these regs, which highlight all of the proposed revisions to the existing regulation, and a corresponding preliminary regulatory impact assessment on our website on the proposed actions page. You can see that linked on the slide there. We've extended the comment period for this package, so it runs all the way through February 16th, and there will be 2 public hearing opportunities to make oral comments to the board. And this is key, we will be scheduling a public meeting in late January for more informal review and discussion of the proposed regulation package. This public meeting is not an official hearing like the public hearing is. Rather, this is an opportunity for discussion and for the district to answer questions. And that doesn't happen during a formal public hearing where comments are received on the record to be heard by the board. I just want to make a note while we're here that regulation development, both new regulations and revisions to existing like this reg package, are really a key place for public involvement. And this is going on right now and will continue through the first quarter of next year. Then moving on to one of our voluntary emission reduction programs, we're really excited to expand our Air Quality Action Partners program in the coming year. This started out focused on our permitted entities, but we really are encouraging any organization to join. Partners must sign up to receive air quality alerts, those that Matt talked about on days when pollution levels are expected to be high, then distribute those alerts to their employees, and then make a few other commitments that will improve air quality. A list of options is provided for folks, and that can be anything from deciding to be an idle-free facility or have an idle-free fleet and enforcing that policy, to undertaking some energy efficiency improvements at your office or facilities. Businesses with an operating permit issued by the district can also follow through on additional, more impactful commitments and be recognized as platinum, gold, or silver level partners. In addition to improving Louisville's air quality and the health of their employees, these businesses and organizations will be recognized in a press release and on social media and at a monthly meeting of our Air Pollution Control Board, as well as our website. In its first year, the ACAPS partners reduced nitrogen oxides, or NOx, by 80.17 tons, including a 40% reduction at LG&E Mill Creek, particulate matter by 0.84 tons, and reduced 29,529 tons of greenhouse gases. We're really proud of our partners and excited to add more to our roster. In the interest of expanding our air quality data and community-wide understanding of our air, APCD is hoping to stand up a community air sensor lending library. With a project proposal in hand, we are seeking funding through multiple grant opportunities that would allow us to purchase an array of different lower cost air quality sensors that will be equipped with solar and cellular capabilities so that we can place them in a variety of locations throughout the community. We already have a handful of PM sensors in hand, and we will be seeking out partners to work with and place them out in those community locations. Lastly, we are excited that our air monitoring network is continuing to grow in equipment and in data acquisition. As Billy talked about, in the coming year, we're going to be growing this program even further. We'll be adding ozone monitoring equipment to that Algonquin Parkway monitoring station. And then we're going to build on the accomplishments of last year, and we'll be able to conduct year-round monitoring of select air toxics at our Cannons Lane site. That's going to allow us to start comparing those data to those that are collected at that Auto GC at the Algonquin Parkway site. With every year, we gain more and deeper insights into Louisville's air quality. So with that, I'm going to move us into our open discussion. While we transition, attendees from the panelist mode to enable everyone the ability to unmute themselves and participate in the discussion, I just have a couple more items to note for you. First, when we share tonight's presentation online, you'll find this page that's full of hyperlinked resources. These include local and EPA resources for finding air quality information that you may want to explore further. And then lastly, I'd like to invite you all to stay in touch with us, either on social media like Facebook or Twitter, or by signing up for our email list. That way you'll be sure to see the Clearing the Air workshop announcements coming in 2023. So thank you for attending tonight, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can start our discussion. If anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can use the raise hand button and we can call on you, or just unmute and throw them out there for us. I will point out again that our presentation materials will be posted to the website, and all the folks that registered for the workshops in this December mini series will receive an email with a link to that. I encourage you all to check out some of those links because this is a really expansive topic and there's plenty more to dive into. Hi, yeah, feel free to jump on in with your question.
Somebody's got to start, huh?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm Dave Vislashell, as you see. I live between Brownsboro Road and Zorn Avenue, that hilltop overlooking Melwood Avenue and the Interstate 75. I've worked with the district a few times. Some of you may remember. It has to do with river metals. Concerns here. At first it was explosions and jarring of our homes. That's in front of BOZA, and I linked you guys in on anything that you could do to help. And so there's been alerts. I know that Pollution Control District is monitoring that. The good news is that has been reduced, at least the explosions, hugely as they face BOZA for a continuation of their 10-year conditional permit approach. So we're very happy about that. But another concern is, and this is one of two I'd like to mention and ask about, is we occasionally, and it can be any season, but it seems to be more wintry, fall, winter, maybe early spring, some in the summer, where you open your door and you step outside in our neighborhood, which is just on the bluff just above, down from the old, Edith Avenue, the operations in there. So we're up on the bluff there, and you open the door and step out, and you can smell kind of a metallic odor, sometimes fairly strong. It also, you can pick it up down on River Road around Champions Park between Edith and Avenue and Zorn Avenue. You know, I expect you're monitoring that in general. I'm just wondering, I just want to kind of, I guess, more of a reminder to me that you're continuing to watch that. I will report in, as a couple neighbors might, as it occurs, and so that would go routinely. So that's one question. The other one has to do with the with Butchertown, the odors that waft up here from the hog, both slaughter and rendering or other packaging operations. A continual problem there, I know, because I'm involved with the neighborhood, our neighborhood community council, and I'm in touch with theirs. So those are the two questions, Michelle. I don't know if anyone can
Sure.
fill in on any part of that and so on, or advice or whatever. Thanks.
Well, we definitely can speak to those, and I know Rachel can. I just want to, before I turn it over to Rachel for some more details, I want to call out two things that you've mentioned for us. One, that there is an important connection between land use and environmental impacts around you and air quality. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that the land development process is an important one to be mindful of when you have concerns about what is happening in your neighborhood. Then also, I just wanted to reiterate what you noted about reporting odors and air quality concerns. That is data for us, and that is an important type of monitoring. Everyone in our city has a monitoring equipment on their face, and it's their nose. And so that is important and a really key step and for us to be able to take the next steps in doing our job. Rachel, do you want to maybe speak to some of the specifics in those questions?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the questions and also for the continuing reports. Not only is it something that we can respond to as an immediate issue, you make a report about an odor, we'll send out a compliance officer to investigate, but that data builds up over time, and that lets us know whether or not there's an issue there that we need to add to a routine surveillance route. So that even when you're not complaining, we're out in that area to be sure that we're there and able to observe potential odors. So thank you for that. With respect to SWIFT, we have an ongoing administrative legal action against them. We do post our administrative legal actions and other civil actions on our enforcement page. So you can keep up with that particular part of our enforcement process. The district, of course, can send a notice of violation. And when we settle a notice of violation, our board is our partner in making that settlement binding. If it's over $5,000, and we do that through an open process as well. But sometimes we need to take a different route, and that's where we're at with respect to SWIFT, with that administrative legal action. So I think someone may have put a link in the chat. If you click on that link, you'll be able to track that litigation going forward.
So nice, we posted it twice. Matt, Bud, and I both at the same time. So that is that enforcement page on our website. And as Rachel mentioned, we do post our enforcement actions. The notices of violation can be found at the links for each of those enforcement actions, and then the eventual disposition of that action itself. All right there on one page. And that goes back for several years. So you may also see an action that starts in say 2021, but you may not have a resolution posted until sometime later this year. So that is a great resource on our website though. Thank you for those questions. Do we have any additional questions?
Could I follow up on one quickie? You mentioned the lending library, a sensor library. How can I track that for the neighborhood here that's been, the folks that have been involved in it? There's a small handful of us. If that's available, then, and we'd say, gee, we'd love to have one, then all we'd have to do, I guess, is ask. I made the note. Maybe that's, that develops.
David, I swear people are going to think you're a plant. You just asked a great question. Again, I would like to invite everyone to follow us on social media, but also via email. When we are able to put that announcement out that we have a lending library in hand, we will shout it from the hilltops. But those are the ways that you will definitely hear about it first. We are, again, seeking funding to try to build that out and make those opportunities known. We hope that those will be an array of sensors that will be a good fit for a lot of different uses. So thank you for asking that, because that is absolutely something that we want. When we have that news to share, we will want to share it widely. To get those potential partners out.
It's a wonderful idea, and thank you so much for responding.
Questions? We have any more questions coming? We're happy to stay on until we need to. Really like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. This last workshop of the year was a nice opportunity to take a look back. 2022 certainly been busy for everyone, and the district's no exception. We're really proud of the accomplishments that we have made this year, and we're really looking forward to continuing the good work of protecting Louisville's air quality and bringing the community into the discussion around that air quality in 2023. All right. With that, if there's no further questions, I will just wish you all a very happy holiday season, a wonderful new year, and I hope to see you back in this space in 2023 for our next Clearing the Air workshop series. Have a good night, everyone.